excel, our initiative to help other people be their best. We also have, as part of that, get engaged. We are a community conscious, action oriented organization. And this is the way for us to take an active role in terms of key issues in our community, designed to inspire, encourage, and engage and empower our sisterhood and our communities. Delta Alpha Alpha Zeta chapter of Zeta Phi Beta sorority was chartered January of 2021 in Collin County. We're involved in the Frisco community, Plano, Allen, Prosper, and Fairview. Today, we're so excited to have our guests, but before we get to them, let me tell you about our moderator, Pamela Hart. She is a former journalist. She is a retired IT manager of a Fortune 500 company. As a matter of fact, one of the top financial services companies in America. I just go ahead and say, she's always a good neighbor. She's also received many accolades and awards for her work in community service, and she is currently the president and founder of Vision Forum. Pamela is the mother of 3 wonderful, highly acclaimed, highly successful children, as well as 2 grandchildren. So Pamela, I am going to turn it over to you so you can introduce us to our guests.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Greta. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited you could join us today. We have 2 exciting candidates for House District 70 running on the Democratic ticket, and we can't wait to hear from them. You know, it's one thing when you see people on paper and you're voting, you see the party, you see the people and the names, but it's an entirely different thing when you get an opportunity to hear people on camera. Listening to their answers to questions is just phenomenal. And Zeta is so proud to help bring this event to you tonight. Last week, we talked with a Republican candidate for House District 70. And tonight, we are so excited to welcome Cass Garcia Hernandez, Cassandra, better known as Cass, and Mihaela Plesa. So welcome, Cass and Mihaela. We're so glad you could join us. Let's kick this off tonight with hearing from both of you, and I'll probably alternate between you. Your platform. Let's hear what's important to you. If you could, give a 30-second to 45-second spiel on what your platform is, what's important to you, and what people should know. Let's start with Mihaela.
Well, thank you so much for having me this evening. Like you said, my name is Mihaela Plesa, and I'm running to be your representative in House District 70. I'm the daughter of political asylum refugees from Romania. I'm a product of our North Texas schools. I have marched and protested for our community, and I realized that they weren't hearing us down in Austin. So I quit my small business job and I went to the legislature to learn how to pass legislation. And I realized that we have a broken system down in Austin. So I would like to see, our grid not being held up by duct tape. I would like to see healthcare expansion in our state. And I would like to make sure that our kids are getting a quality modern education in our public schools.
Thank you for that. And Cass.
Thanks, Pam. So my name is Cassandra Garcia Hernandez, and I'm running to be your state representative of House District 70. I am the DEI candidate. I've been fighting for diversity, equity, and inclusion since I was very young. I actually moved here to North Texas, and I graduated from high school early and went off to Houston and obtained my business as well as my law degree. And then I returned back here to North Texas and have since that time been practicing in immigration as well as civil law. I also sat on the City of Dallas Ethics Board as an ethics commissioner, where I fought for transparency and ethical behavior of all of our elected officials. I've been part of great organizations here in North Texas that have helped me grow not only within the profession, but as a community advocate. And I've been fighting for you in the courthouse now, and I'm ready to fight for you in the State House. I want to be sent to Austin to tackle important issues like transparency and reform on recapture, property tax relief, Medicaid expansion, fighting for our voting rights and women's rights, and fully funding education. And I hope that I will have all of your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the both of you for giving us your platform and letting us know a little bit more about you. Now we're going to start with some questions. I'll start with Kat. And this subject is healthcare. So Texas is one of 14 states that did not expand Medicaid under the ACA. And so some folks feel that it is unlikely to do so under the current leadership. How can uninsured and underinsured folks best be served in the short term and the long term? We'll start with you, Cass.
Sure. So I have been the candidate from the very beginning who has been talking about Live Well. I'm sure most of the people who are on the call who are in House District 70 have received a ton of mailers and text messages, and of course, us at the door talking about Live Well Texas, which was one of the only bipartisan Medicaid expansion bills that was actually authored by Representative Julie Johnson, who has endorsed me. That was actually last legislative session. She ended up being able to secure 76 members in order to sign on that. But unfortunately, because of political football, that unfortunately was not able to get passed. And so I just recently had a conversation both with Representative Johnson as well as Beto. And Beto said, if he's elected governor, that's going to be one of his first bills that he makes sure that he signs on to. And so I definitely know, and we actually just had a town hall just this past Saturday. Representative Julie Johnson said that she does absolutely intend on reintroducing that bill next legislative session. And of course, when I'm right next to her, I intend on supporting her on that bill and making sure that we've got everybody on board. And like I said, that does have bipartisan support. So I have a lot of hope that we will be able to hopefully pass it the next legislative session.
Fantastic. And Mihaela.
Yes, this is a really great question. I agree. We most likely will not see Medicaid expansion next session. But as someone who has worked in the legislature last session to successfully pass Medicaid expansion exemptions to specialty hospitals, I know that we can find unique ways to ensure access to uninsured and underinsured Texans. Live Well Texas did have bipartisan support, but unfortunately, that bill did not come anywhere close to passing. It didn't even get a hearing in committee. Texans do not have time to waste. In the short term, we need to be concerned about the people currently on Medicaid covered under what is called the Public Health Emergency Declaration. As of today, 1.3 million Texans, including children, are at risk of losing their coverage when the Public Health Emergency Declaration ends. Because of the PHE, these Texans haven't had to jump through hoops to maintain Medicaid, and when it ends, redetermination of their benefits put them at risk of losing this care. We need to properly fund the Texas Department of Health and Human Services so they are able to communicate quickly and effectively with these individuals to redetermine their eligibility and continue their care. In the long term, yes, we need to expand Medicaid in Texas, but we need to work with state agencies now to get them the help that our communities deserve at this moment.
Thanks for sharing. Well, as we talk about healthcare, as you know, one of the topics in the news right now, very hot topic, is about women's healthcare. And so it's even more critical than ever in terms of what we are doing with women in healthcare. So how can women across District 70 receive quality healthcare pre and post pregnancy throughout their lifetimes? So let's start with you, Mihaela.
Okay, I love this question because it gives me the opportunity to talk about an issue that I am passionate about, and that's women's health. The issue of maternal morbidity and mortality was one of the first issues that I worked on as a legislative staffer when I quit my job and went down to Austin to learn how to pass legislation. Pregnant women in Texas are more likely to be uninsured and less likely to seek early prenatal care than the rest of the country. They give birth in one of the worst states for maternal morbidity, and low-income parents will be kicked off of Medicaid sooner than in many other states. While working with Representative Sean Theory, I had the opportunity to work on expanding the Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Task Force. Theory's bill specifically requested the task force to gather more information on the number of deaths and the reason for increasing number of pregnancy-related deaths we're seeing in communities of color. The State Maternal Morbidity Task Force Review Committee found that women of color made up 31% of pregnancy-related deaths, but only 11% of live births. If we want to ensure women are receiving quality healthcare pre and post pregnancy, we must first believe them in their healthcare needs and trust women in their healthcare decisions.
Thanks so much. Cassandra.
As a Democrat, I would be in the minority once again, as we all on this call are aware. But I can serve in the role of a strong oversight when it comes to current spending in our women's health network and community clinic plans. Crisis pregnancy centers, as we're all aware of, are getting the funds that should have been appropriated for actual reproductive health care. Of course, we know what has happened to Planned Parenthood and the fact that that particular institution, one that I have been part of for a very long time and was actually introduced by my mother to Planned Parenthood, has been attacked and of course, we know, excluded from Medicaid. It's going to be on all of us as community organizers, elected officials, to get together and come up with a mobile community care alternatives like Women on the Border have been doing for many, many years. The truth is, Texas has been living in a world without Roe in many places since 2011. We need to make healthcare affordable and accessible by looking into creative care like municipalities have been doing for a decade. I don't plan on waiting on Greg Abbott or Brett to tell me when we can serve our Texas women. As the Democrat who's out fundraise all candidates consistently, I'll continue to bring people together and create resources for these mobile community and public private driven alternatives while we wait for women to roar back in November or for Biden to pack that court.
Thanks for that. This time the question goes to Cass, and we're going to change subjects and talk a little bit about education in the district. So Plano, let's just take Plano, for example. Plano ISD sent back over $190 million to the state via recapture, the Robin Hood effort, despite more than a third of our students being classified as economically disadvantaged. How can Plano and other recapture districts continue to provide excellent education to all students while sending that amount of money back to the state? Cass.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. That is obviously a huge concern of a lot of folks that we have been reaching out the doors. I would say it's actually one of the biggest concerns of everybody. You're correct by as far as the fact that $190 million has been sent back. You know, sending those funds, we've left our own district in deficit for the last 3 years. And of course, we know when we're in deficit that, you know, it has a negative impact on our own children here within the district. In particular, I know the TEA actually just disclosed as far as the amounts and areas that have been sending back recapture. And I know that you had talked about roughly a third. Well, roughly 40% of our own children are receiving reduced lunch. And that is something that we need to take into account whenever we are sending money back to Austin. TEA actually said that as far as the rankings of the cities that have sent back or the areas that have been sent back, the districts, you know, it goes Austin and then Houston and then Plano. And I'm sure all of us on this call know that we are not the size of Houston and we're not the size of Austin. And we have been sending substantial amounts back to the state. I will say from the very beginning that I am the only candidate who has been saying that we need to reform Robin Hood. And I say that as somebody who actually benefited from Robin Hood. I actually was born in a small town up in the Panhandle before I moved here to North Texas. And if it wasn't for Robin Hood, I wouldn't be here on this call and wouldn't have the successes that I've had if it wasn't for that program. So the idea behind Robin Hood is a very noble one. but we need to fix the system. We need to, and I know we may talk about this a little bit later because it goes more into property taxes, and I feel like that's a whole nother topic, but we need to make sure that we are increasing what the state is funding of public education. If we close and also make sure to close the loophole of the state being able to shift those funds that are actually intended for education into other areas of the budget, that would help as well. And I will also be fighting for making sure that we take into account a recapture district's own situation before we cut a check to Austin. I think that there are multiple things that can be fixed in regards to Robin Hood. And I have actually already been having conversations with state reps in other recapture districts about a bill, or even more than just one bill, to be able to achieve these particular issues. And I hope that we'll be able to bring some transparency and relief to our district as well as their districts too.
Fantastic. Mihaela, how can students benefit when we're sending that type of revenue back?
Yeah, no, this is a really important question, and it's one that I hear resonating on the doors as well. My opponent is wrong, though. She's not the only one that talks about the fact that we need to recalculate the way Robin Hood is working for our state. And many who are unfamiliar with public school funding will tell you that all we need is more transparency. But it's transparent that the current system isn't sustainable. Last week, I was at the Plano ISD school board meeting where I met with parents concerned with their kids losing their band teachers because of school district cutbacks. Parents and students in our school systems are feeling the pains of these policies now. Yes, we do need to ensure that money stays in public education, but that's not enough. Parents in House District 70 want a representative in Austin who understands the intricacies of public school finance system. I was working in the legislature in 2019 when HB3 was passed. Our school financing bill was passed and it wasn't set in perpetuity. What we learned in the years since the passage is that Texas schools need sustainable and predictable funding. What I recommend is the legislator should commission an independent study to determine the true cost of providing a high quality modern education. Once a cost-based basic allotment is established, it should be adjusted to inflation annually. This will keep Texas's $60 billion school budget more balanced and predictable. The system right now, it's not funded into perpetuity, and that's the biggest problem with HB3. So I believe that we do need transparency, but we need a representative who understands how to pass the legislation and get the job done, because we need the results today.
Wonderful. Thanks for your answer. So as we continue to talk a little bit about education, as you know, local school boards, lots of controversy from all sides of the coin. Local elections are becoming more partisan and increasingly polarizing. So what, if anything, as a state representative, do you plan to do to keep the nonpartisan theme running with and keep outside influences, especially out of school and school issues, or can you? Let's start with you, Mihaela.
Yeah, in the last school board elections, we saw excellent school board members and candidates get railroaded by extremists who want to use our children as political pawns. Educating our children should not be a partisan issue. Hopefully, this wakes people up to how important local elections are and stimulate activism. We need to fully fund public education and trust teachers and administrators who are on the ground. The state's role is to give them the tools to teach our children. As a legislative staffer working for Representative Arevalo, I worked to pass a bill that helped all school districts by expanding new infrastructure facility allotments. Again, the key to being a successful legislator is for our community to come in and think creatively how to move our priorities forward. As your state representative, I would leverage my leadership, build relationships with school board members that overlap in the district. I can be a sounding board for our community in Austin. The goal is to work together and for our representatives to keep their ear on the ground as to what the needs of our community are. It's imperative that our school boards let educators educate our kids, don't burn books. You know, at the end of the day, the school board is getting money from the state. That's why during my campaign, I attended the Plano ISD school board meetings. I have made it a priority to meet the new Plano ISD superintendent and her leadership council. A lot of people will talk about what they want to do to help public education, but I'm talking about the things that I have actually done in the Capitol to help public schools.
Okay. Fair answer. Cass, any way we can keep some of the partisan bickering and special interests out? And what are your thoughts?
So as a Democratic state rep, I can definitely demand that our state party begin its program Lift earlier. That particular program assists in strong Democrats running for local government. Unfortunately, it doesn't activate until shortly before the municipal filing period ends for those races. The Texas Republicans, they invest much more time, money, and strategy than we do, and we continue to always have to play defense. We have to continue to, collect strong offense tools whenever possible. And also, we need to be mindful as well. There are some Republicans that support better pay for teachers. We have to be able to work with those particular individuals, knowing the fact that we are the minority who do believe in better pay for teachers, respecting teachers. And of course, we saw the 13th check for teachers as well. We saw that in the special sessions this last year and all the years that similar bills have been filed. It will be my job as the state rep to be a liaison between our local elected officials, our communities, and even the Republicans in the state ledge to work hard on getting everyone to move past this political football game that's been going on in our schools. The truth is every district, no matter if it's a blue or a red district, is all facing staffing crisis. I mean, we even saw that Abbott was saying that he was going to create a committee to find out what was going on when we all know what is going on. You have, top tier school districts just like ours, across North Texas. We're seeing lower kindergarten enrollments for the first time because of parents' confusion, their mistrust, or the lack of staff available to take on a full kindergarten class. I'm going to continue to do what I've done the best in this race. I'm going to mobilize our local community. I'm going to build on the existing strong relationships that I have on both sides of the aisle. Unlike my opponent, I haven't been spending a ton of time demonizing or alienating fellow Democrats, elected Democrats that are currently in the state house. And I won't start after November either. I'm going to work with anybody and everybody who is willing to put aside this political football, take care of our teachers, fully fund our education, and keep politics out of our classroom.
Thanks, Cass. So for folks who are listening, as you can see, we've got some very important topics we're discussing. So get your questions ready, put them in chat. If you're on Facebook Live, put your questions in there too, because we'd like to help you get those questions answered if we have time after this is done. One more question in the education arena. As you know, Governor Abbott talked about migrant children and whether to fund education for them. What do you think about that opinion in terms of what we need to do for children in Texas, all children? Cass, go ahead.
Well, as an immigration lawyer, I can tell you I definitely have some words about this. My opinion is that honestly, I'm just tired of these hateful stunts that continuously are coming out of our governor. This is legally unenforceable, and it comes at the cost of our immigrant communities, honestly. We saw the same thing with Paxton and trans kids and the CPS directive that Abbott did. We saw the panic and the frustration and the attacks that happened on those families and continues to go on as it winds through the court system. You know, this isn't legally enforceable, but the hatred, the fear, and the obstacles it causes are very real within the community. I am sure that everybody who's on this call has seen since that time, whenever he went on to that or called in and announced that, he has been backpedaling because he's getting so much heat from everybody right now, because it's just absolutely appalling that he would even say something like that. Like I said, I'm the only immigration lawyer in this race from either party, Republican or Democrat. I have founded my firm's immigration practice, and I created a pro bono clinic that serviced many in the community, including a substantial amount of immigrants across North Texas. And that even includes whenever I did all of the eviction pro bono work during the pandemic. Quite a substantial amount of them are undocumented individuals that have children within our school system. Abbott's threat to challenge that particular case, which is the Plyler versus Doe case, it's cruel and it's un-Texan, and that's why he is receiving the heat that he is right now. We know that it's not only going to harm the children, but it harms our economy as well. What we would be doing is failing to educate future productive members of our state, and we know that our state would not benefit from that. I'm going to continue to uphold our U.S. Constitution, our Texas Constitution, and I will be a very loud advocate against these hateful actions. And I serve in defense of these children, as well as all of children here in Texas, in making sure that they have the ability to be able to have an education here within the state, and not be punished for choices that they themselves didn't even have the ability to make.
Thanks for that. Mihaela. Did we lose Mihaela?
I think we did. We may can just move in, her internet crashed. So maybe we can just move to the next question.
Absolutely.
And we'll come back to her.
We'll wait, and yes, we'll definitely grab her when she comes back. Thanks for that, Cass. Taxes. Property taxes are very high.
Mihaela's back.
Oh,
Mihaela, you're back. Welcome back.
Crashed.
I'm not sure if you heard the last question. I think you were still here when we were talking about Governor Abbott's opinion in terms of migrant children and educating them. Yes. What do you think of that opinion? And we need our kids in the state to be educated. So what do you feel about the migrant children in that issue?
Yeah, and sorry that I just crashed.
Okay.
I don't know. We need broadband expansion, I guess. The best investment, I think, that, in the economy of Texas, in reducing crime and increasing wages, is to invest in the education of our children. Texas's school leaders have said the state should focus on providing a strong education for all children, unauthorized immigrants included. Chiseling away at state funding for immigrants would hamper the state's economy, undercut communities, and do irreparable harm to Texas. In my time working for Representative Ray Lopez, when people came to me about their children's education, about safety concerns of their community, I didn't ask them their immigration status. I asked them, how can we help? And every child deserves a state that allows them, a quality education, period. During the House Public Education Committee hearing on April 26th, this was before Abbott's comments, 3 superintendents offered their views. Texas's border crisis has affected their schools. None who spoke that day said that they faced an undue strain because of unauthorized immigrant students. In fact, the reports of immigrants flooding over Texas's borders, 2 of the superintendents that day, McAllen and Garland, said their districts had lost enrollment over the past few years because of the pandemic and how the state had been dealing with the pandemic. So Governor Abbott should be more concerned with seeing other changes for Texas students, like universal pre-kindergarten, more funding for career training, increased teacher pay for better recruitment and retainment, and an increase in WADE funding for bilingual programs. And that goes back into HB3. Free universal public education is the backbone of what makes America great. Collin County is growing at twice the rate of Dallas County. Businesses are moving here because of the opportunities they see in our community. I think that denying children education because of the happenstance of their parents' birth is cruel. And I also think it's economic suicide. So these policies by Greg Abbott, they don't save us any taxpayer dollars, and Collin County can't afford these policies, and neither can the rest of Texas.
Thanks. Now, speaking of border security, it's largely under the purview of the federal government. However, these issues are constantly brought up by local and state elections and election officials. So what are your views on border security and immigration? And what about actions from Democrats? Anything that they can improve upon? Let's hear from you, Cass.
Well, I think we could talk quite extensively about the political stunts that Abbott has been pulling at the border that have been affecting us. And of course, the people who have been pulled into it as well. The first one in particular that I want to talk about is the Operation Lone Star that we know has cost the state more than $3 billion. There was last year a immigrant influx in the Rio Grande, in the South Texas Valley. And the county judge there actually said that Operation Lone Star didn't accomplish anything beyond arresting people and making them criminals. He actually very eloquently said that the problem was not criminal activity, but the sheer number of immigrants seeking better opportunities who sometimes attempt to cross into his community at once, straining the resources and overwhelming the Border Patrol, which I'm sure everybody on the call is aware about the lifting of 42, which they're anticipating is going to cause the same issue. So the solution that he actually recommended, which I agree with, and so do a lot of immigrant advocates, is that there needs to be a comprehensive approach to addressing the reasons why people are coming to the US and provide more legal avenues for them to be able to do so. As an immigration attorney, I can tell you that the system is very complex and it's very hard to navigate. And there isn't as many avenues as people think that there are for people who are attempting to escape persecution and really bad circumstances in their home countries. In addition to that, we know that the Operation Lone Star circus that Abbott has, been allowing to continue, we also know has been affecting our National Guard members, and they've been suffering poor working conditions, pay delays, and even some of them have committed suicide. Meanwhile, they've been out there, having to work while their tuition benefits have been slashed. And now they've been told that even graduate National Guard members who are attempting to obtain their graduate degree will no longer have any aid at all. And so he is continuing to run up his tab, and it's us taxpayers that are going to have to cover that. In January, he increased that number to 10,000, and they ended up moving $500 million from DPS, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission to help cover those costs. And in addition to that, I believe it was actually just this week that I read that there were congressional Democrats who are actually accusing Greg Abbott of misappropriating our COVID-19 funds that we received from Congress. And so they actually sent a letter to the US Treasury Secretary to investigate his use of that federal money, which was intended for coronavirus prevention and relief, to finance the Lone Star. And so he's just continuing to be very wasteful, and even the numbers that they have been touting, there's a report out there that says that the numbers have been completely muddled up. They have expanded the area that they are taking, supposed criminal convictions are not even necessarily in the border areas, but are encompassing more of the state of Texas. And so, people have been filing FOIAs to get actual, statistics of showing to what extent that Lone Star Project has been able to accomplish anything, and they haven't been able to obtain that information. I know as well, we know about the commercial vehicle stunt that he pulled, and how that impacted us as Texans. Actually, just yesterday, Mexico and US actually reached a deal to literally get diverted around Texas. So now instead of coming into Texas with commercial vehicles, now they will be going through New Mexico. And that will further impact our economy. And so we know immigrants are the backbone of Texas economy as well as our nation's economy. They have a huge part in this success story right here in Collin County. We have a lot of immigrants here in Collin County. We've been blessed to have the great community that we do. My husband is an immigrant. I've met a ton of neighbors while we've been block walking who are immigrants. And so we need to take in consideration their contributions to the community and just stop these attacks and, really work at addressing what our issues are, which is really honestly immigration reform.
Yes, you seem very knowledgeable on this topic. And before we go to Mihaela, I know there's been a lot of discussion in terms of providing funding for countries where immigrants are coming from. If you could give us your 30-second thought on that in terms of whether that will be more helpful. And I know that that's been tried a time or two. It's been talked about a lot. Where are we with that, and what can we do in terms of helping the countries where folks are coming from and looking at those needs?
So I will tell you from somebody who's been studying that, and in particular, it's the South American countries where we're getting a substantial amount from Honduras as well as others. The issue is not necessarily with the money, and the problem is that who we're getting the money to. A lot of some of the immigrants that are traveling here to Texas, they're leaving because there is extensive corruption within their governments. And so whenever we send money and not make sure that the money is being used properly, then what we're doing is we're just continuing to fund an unjust government that these people are fleeing. So they're really not benefiting from it. So I do believe that absolutely the US should be addressing the issues and the destabilization within these countries, but I don't necessarily think just sending money over to the government is going to relieve those issues, especially whenever it's an issue of corruption within the government.
Thanks for that very, very important statement. Mihaela, what are your thoughts on border security, and what can Democrats improve upon? And if you have a thought in terms of what happens with the countries the immigrants are coming from, as I asked Cass, go ahead and address that as well.
Yeah, well, I honestly believe that the American story is an immigrant story. Like I said in my opening, I'm the daughter of political asylum refugees from Romania. So I'm a walking testimony to the American immigration system. And I hate the narrative around the border because, like, my family, we came here, like a lot of immigrants came here. We didn't go over a bridge or swim a river. We came here by plane, right? So we're not really addressing the issues when we're scapegoating and demonizing instead of actually protecting citizens. The disinformation campaign tactics we see playing out at the border, in my opinion, is nothing more than theater. brought on by a governor who is trying to get reelected in a time when our children are dying in foster care systems. Like I said, our grid is being held up by duct tape, what it appears like. Women have lost all but all their constitutional rights to health care. We were speaking earlier about Operation Lone Star. I currently work for a Democratic House member who sits on the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee. In that committee, we oversee Operation Lone Star, the border mission that has cost Texans billions of dollars. I have been, I have a front row seat to the misrepresentation and the misorganization that is happening down there. We need to have stunts like this stopped. We aren't treating people with dignity and respect. And you guys asked me a question earlier about public school funding. Well, we can start by not sending $1 billion to the failed border missions. This Operation Lone Star is one of many in the history of border missions that Texas has done. And so, we really need to stop these political antics to incite voters in midterm elections. We're hurting people.
Okay, I'm going to ask folks to keep me honest. I believe we have about 15 minutes. So we're going to go to the next question, and we're going to open the floor pretty soon for folks who have questions before we close it out. So I believe we talked a little bit about property taxes. They're extremely high. They're going higher. So what would you do to provide relief if you were elected? Mihaela.
Yes, well, property tax legislation is really hard to pass. Most of the time, it takes constitutional amendments like the two we just voted on May 7th. I have worked to pass those types of property tax exemptions. Last session, Representative Ray Lopez had Proposition 8 on your November constitutional election ballot. That was an initiative to give property tax exemptions to our military Gold Star families. Propositions like Prop 8, that bill took almost 6 years to pass. Sometimes Democrats don't get it. In the face of fierce political opposition, we have to find creative ways to give Texans tax relief. Yes, we have to update recapture formulas. The largest part of our property tax bill is funding from public education. So we have to fix those funding formulas. But we can also look at ways to make it easier for people to pay their property taxes. I have a concern with people being able to afford to stay in their home. Like seniors, like a woman, I knocked on her door this week. She has been living in her home for 50 years. Imagine that. She lives on a fixed income. She said she has the money to pay for her property taxes because they're frozen due to her age. But if she could make multiple payments instead of one lump sum or 2 bulk payments, it would help her keep a more balanced budget on her fixed income. Legislation like this is creative and would help not just seniors and the disabled, but legislation like this could help younger people achieve homeownership. You need to have a representative that is well-versed in the House rules of how to get these things done. And that is what I'm offering. Somebody who has taken the time to learn the intricacies of the problem to bring results back to our community on day one.
Fantastic. Cass.
So I think the last time I checked, as far as the property taxes, I think roughly around 60% is actually goes towards education. So it's a substantial amount. There's no doubt in my mind that the state is able to fully fund education. And we know if they did, that would obviously relieve a whole bunch of tax burden on us as property owners. And I know that as of right now, the state of Texas is essentially funding about 38% of education. And we know a few decades ago, it was actually right around 50%. And I've actually applauded, I think, I think I actually heard Jamie at one point state that she would actually like to see that increase to around 60%, which I would love 100%, but I would certainly support 60% for them to be able to fund. So, because we obviously know the more that they fund, the less of the tax burden on the property owner. So working on that would be very important to me. I know as well, like I said, I benefited from Robinhood. And I, of course, like I said, it's a noble cause, but it has become another way of the state to essentially take and shift money from that education budget and move it to other areas. It's also given them an excuse to give us less for the fact that they were obtaining those payments of Robinhood. So I do think, and I always tell people, you know, if the state did fully fund education, we wouldn't need Robinhood. That's another thing to consider as well, because I know earlier we had talked about the fact that, you know, a lot of the voters, that's what they're talking about at the door, is their concern about the recapture payments. We wouldn't have to worry about that if the public education was being fully funded by the state. In addition to that, you know, there are other ways that we can relieve tax burdens on property owners. There's a couple of different ideas that even other candidates have talked about, you know, such as legalizing gambling. We've got a lot of folks here in Texas that go to Louisiana and go to Oklahoma, and those states benefit from our Texas dollars. Why not let Texas benefit from those profits? In addition to that, you know, legalizing marijuana, same issue. You know, we see what states who have legalized marijuana, how much they have benefited from that. Why shouldn't Texas also get in line and do that, with knowing that it will also alleviate some of the issues that we have in the criminal justice system as well, which would be essentially a help in both areas. You know, we just, like I said, these are just different ideas of where we can essentially capture profit and move it into areas that us as property owners are having to fund.
All righty. Thank you, ladies. So you think my questions were wonderful? There are some great questions in chat. So let's go to those at this moment. The first question that we see that we'd like to ask, let's just go with this one. I keep hearing candidates say we need to fully fund education. What I don't hear from anyone is how. What money will you move from which place to what place, and what will you fund first, second, and third? Wow, that's a mouthful. So again, we all talk about fully funding education. We never really hear a lot of the hows. How will you do it? And what will you think about first, second, and third? Who'd like to go first?
I'll go first. I kind of do talk about this in my platform. That's basically what I say when I talk about the basic allotment. We have to have a study done to see what it actually costs to educate a child within our own communities. What it costs to educate a child in the Panhandle is not the same of what it costs to educate a child in Plano, you know, and I'm talking about modern education, right? We saw during the pandemic the implementation of the digital divide and the struggles that families had. So we need to go back and reformulate the basic allotment. That's a really great place to start. And first, second, and third things that we need to fund, well, obviously the first one is bilingual education and special needs. Pick one or the other, that's the first top two. Those are the top two. And I think the third, we really need to look at pre-K, universal pre-K. We need to talk about, you know, getting children in programs outside of just school. We're lacking childcare programs. We are lacking quality after school programs. So those would be the top three things of where the money should be allocated. And as somebody who has done now 3 budget nights, written budget writers, and appropriated funds from one state agency to the other, I can't tell you right this second what that would look like. I would need to have that information in front of me to see what those state budgets look like going into the next legislative session. but I have been there and I have done those budget riders for budget night before. So I'm ready to go on day one.
Okay. Let's talk about this question, and we can give both of you an opportunity. It's about homestead exemptions. So there's a question in chat or statement that says they should align with property values. Why is the exemption limited to 25,000 when in other states exemptions are as high as 100,000? So what about Texas and the why? Who'd like to go?
You know, I'm actually not too knowledgeable as far as why it is set at that. I believe that obviously if other states have a higher one, we should definitely increase ours as well. Being as somebody who you can actually plug my name into CCAT and I'll pop up as a property owner, I can tell you that most certainly I would love if we could increase the homestead exemption because it obviously benefits us, both me and my husband, as being homeowners. I'm not opposed to obviously increasing that. And I think that it's very important that we take a look at to as far as what extent, that number has been created and how we would want to increase that and to what extent we would like to increase it.
Okay, thanks for that. How about this question? It's unlikely that Democrats will control the House or the Senate. How do you plan to effectively represent in the minority? Or is it like it's considered a purple state right now? So what's next?
I'll take that one. I can say that, I've worked for Democratic House members for the last 5 years. The current member that I work for right now, Representative Lopez, he's a sophomore. People say, to state reps all the time, oh, you're a freshman, you're a sophomore, you can't get anything done. Well, my state rep got a lot done last session. He passed 6 bills and a constitutional amendment while the governor of Texas had a warrant out for his arrest and he was sitting in DC fighting for our voting rights. So if anyone's going to tell you you're in the minority and you can't get anything done and the Democrats need to play defense all the time, then you've picked the wrong Democrat, okay? If you're a Democrat that is upset because you're holding other Democrats accountable and you think that that's demonizing them, then you're the wrong kind of Democrat. I'm a Democrat that has worked for Democratic House members and have passed legislation with freshmen, like expanding the maternal morbidity task force, like Proposition 8 to give military families a property tax exemption, like making attorneys be trauma-informed care trained so that they can treat properly our foster care kids. So we don't lose hundreds of kids in our foster care system. I have done that working as a legislative director, as a staffer for Democratic House members, making them successful. So I can tell you on my proven record of success, if I'm your state representative, on that first session, we're passing bills, baby.
Thanks for that. Cass, do you have an answer to that? So how do you plan to represent if in the minority?
I am absolutely honored to be the Democratic candidate on this call who has the most state rep endorsements, Democratic state rep endorsements, and the only candidate that's been endorsed by state rep leadership. And the reason why is because they have had the opportunity to know who I am. Some of them have known me for many years because I used to, back in the day, would block walk or help fundraise for their fundraisers. And so they know who I am. They know me in the community, and they know that me as being a lawyer, I have perfected the skills of being able to negotiate, to be able to reach across the aisle and work with people who are essentially opposed to the wants of me and my client, to be able to compromise and figure out where we can work and reach a compromise between all parties when needed, but when not, then to go, take it all the way to trial. So, I've made it my platform at the very beginning whenever I was speaking to different Democratic state reps, is to let them know that, I'm willing to work with anybody and everybody, especially on the Democratic side, because like you said, we are the minority. So there shouldn't be, any need to be petty or tear down other Democrats, knowing that we are the minority and every vote is very important. And at the same time, I'm also willing to work with any Republicans that are willing to, reach across the aisle and get bills passed that benefit not only people within House District 70 or Collin County, but all Texans. And so I'm ready to work with anybody and everybody. I don't care what their background is. I don't care what their party affiliation is. I'm ready to get to work with anybody and everybody. And so that's why I have the most support of our Democratic state reps.
Thanks for that. We're likely to get to go maybe a minute or two over, but really quickly, we've got 2 more questions. We're going to try to get to those. One, if you can give me your 30-second thought on this. Why have we not seriously explored a vetted immigrant work program? We have been talking about that for years. It should have been part of the new NAFTA. COVID has caused retirees to leave the workplace early. People are making less babies. Now we have net negative immigration. Why not work harder to get immigration so our businesses can have a workforce to serve their communities, their customers, and frontline jobs? Who'd like to take that one?
I'm happy to take it as the immigration lawyer. I think it was, who was it that asked that question? I'm trying to say.
It was Monigo.
Monigo?
Oh, gotcha. Well, thank you so much for asking that. And 100% I agree. We absolutely should do that. We know that, just like you were saying, we've got a lot of folks, even being a partner here in my own law firm, we have people who are no longer in the industry anymore. They just decided that they just didn't want to be in the industry. And so a lot of us, small business owners and small firms, we're finding it hard to find people to fill jobs. And we know that when we don't have a full workforce, that affects everything that we do and the services that we're able to perform. And it impacts our other clients as well. So when we have, openings, and no matter what industry it is, and we have people willing to work in those areas, absolutely, we should be pulling them on board and putting them in programs to upskill them and prepare them and get them into jobs that they're willing to work, because we all benefit from that.
Thanks. Mihaela, did you have anything on that?
No, I definitely agree. I mean, like I said before, this is a economy plus. This is a plus to our economy. This is helpful. As a product of immigrants, I'm for it. I've seen the successes. I've seen the small business startups. I've seen my mom work her way up from nothing, and I've seen my community build itself up. So I think that it's a shame that we're using communities of color, immigrant communities, as proxies to fight political wars and incite people to come out and vote. It's against what our American values should be about. We should be this should be a place of unity. And I'm saddened to see what the governor is doing on the border and inciting so much hate in our society.
All right. One more. You can answer one of these. You can answer all of these. You can say, woo. And that question is, who was the first Democrat you voted for president? Who did you support in the 2020 primary? Who was the first Democrat you voted for governor? Whom did you support in the 2018 primary? And then we'll let you all vote.
I'll just say, I have voted since 2008. I have voted all the time. I voted for Barack Obama. I voted for Beto. I voted for Wendy Davis. I don't even know who I voted for. If they were a Democrat, I was voting for them. My parents taught me at a very young age. My grandmother brought me to her when she became a citizen. She took me out of school. It was so important for my family. They took me out of school that day to watch my family become nationalized citizens. So they have always instilled in me pride in my civic duty. They have taught me that in our country, we don't get to do this. And so I have always voted, and I'm proud to vote. And when I voted for myself for the very first time, I realized the weight.
Thanks for that. Cass.
So I was laughing because Mihaela actually said the same people I voted for. So I also voted for Beto and Wendy Davis and Barack Obama as well. So, and
Thanks for
yes,
that.
vote for our Democrats, vote
We're
blue.
getting ready to close, and looks like Mihaela might be frozen, but let's go ahead, Cass. Why should people in District 70 vote for you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I can't thank all of you enough for doing that. I know that we had already had conversations even before getting invited, and I'm absolutely honored to be here with you all. You know, like I said before, I actually was the last candidate to join the race. I literally joined the Friday before December 13th. But we ended up coming out on top. So I ended up getting the most votes of any other candidate running for the primary. I have consecutively been out fundraising Democrats and Republicans, all of them up to this point without self-funding and without loans. Hopefully I'll do it again. I think the report is due tomorrow. So we've got another report coming out. So please take a look at it. I'm the only candidate endorsed by teachers, the only candidate endorsed by National Latino Law Enforcement Organization. I also am endorsed by Plumbers Union. I'm the only candidate endorsed by Annie's List. I do have the most state rep endorsements of any other candidate, and I'm the only one endorsed by state rep leadership. And the reason why is because a lot of folks have had the opportunity to get to know who I am. And most importantly, they got to know about my community service and that I have the heart to serve. And that has been the most important thing that I've been trying to let people know, that I'm a candidate of the people for the people. I want to be the person that carries the diverse voices of House District 70 to Austin. So like I said, I've been fighting for you in the courthouse. I hope that you will send me to the state house, and I hope to have your support. We've got a block walk going on Saturday. Representative Rafael Anchia, as well as Representative Victoria Nyave, will be block walking with us on Saturday. Please come out if you'd like. My website's www.cas1sfortx.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Mihaela, why should people in District 70 vote for you?
Well, I am the community back candidate. For what my opponent just said about coming out on top, there was 78 votes difference between the two of us. And as my opponent was talking about her fundraising, you know, I didn't get into this race to talk about fundraising for our campaigns. I got into this race to talk about how we're going to fund our public schools, how we're going to fix our grid, how we're going to fix our broken healthcare system. So even though my opponent wants to say that she's out fundraise everybody, it's just not true. Go pull up the fundraising reports. Jamie Jolly raised almost 300,000. Eric Bolin had 300,000. We'll see how much special interest money my opponent wants to bring in this race when the financial report is back, you know, filed. But why you should back me is because I'm the community back candidate. I have more Democratic precinct chair endorsements from Collin County and HD70 than anybody else in this race. I'm the only candidate in this race endorsed by our Democratic organizations here in the district, like Plano area Dems, Richardson area Dems. I'm backed by former Democratic candidates that ran in this seat. They are the ones, you are the ones that have been paving Collin County blue for the last 10 years. You are the ones that have been knocking on doors, talking to voters, and got these people so scared that they redrew a district in Southern Collin County. Not outside members, not other state reps. It was the work of the people of Collin County. And I'm proud to be the grassroots candidate, backed by the leaders of our community, taking no special interest money, and taking only money from Collin County and HD70. That's why the leadership has backed my campaign, because they know when I get to Austin, I won't need my colleagues to tell me how to vote or how to do the job. I've taken the time to learn. The legislative session is 140 days every 2 years. It's a long learning curve. So while Cassandra is taking notes in freshman orientation, I'm being the clerk's office filing bills.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, ladies. As the audience can definitely see, it's going to be a hard-fought battle. We appreciate you joining us today. Everyone, early voting begins May 16th. The election is actually on the 24th. We appreciate your joining us today. Have a fantastic day. Thank you, ladies.